and share my screen. Okay. Welcome, everyone. We are just admitting folks. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I'm seeing a lot of folks whose audio is still connecting, so we'll just give it a couple seconds since it's right at 2 o'clock. I'm sorry. There we go. Our first challenge. Here we are. Okay. I think everyone who has joined so far, audio is connected. So welcome everyone and good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today. This is the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's James Cary Smith Community Grant Program Tips and Tricks Pre-Application Webinar. So if you're here for that, you are definitely in the right place. My name is Mona Abood. I'm not with the Air District. I'm with a firm called Interethnica. And we help our clients center community voices and find equitable pathways on their projects. And we're really honored to have an ongoing partnership with the Air District in supporting this grant. And it's just been a real privilege to work on this. And thank you all for your time today. We're going to be hosting this tips and tricks webinar. We've got a lot of great information coming your way. Before we dive in, I just want to say hello and give the opportunity to introduce you to some other folks here who are with the Air District and my team. So in a bit, you'll be hearing from Eleanor Mattern. She'll be giving an overview quickly of the grant. We also have Jen Ferreira here with the Air District and Joshua Abraham, and Anish Rana may be joining us, who might have questions, may all be helpful in answering some of your questions. On my team, a bit later from the Interethnica side, you'll be hearing from Deborah O, who's going to give some presentation on some of the tips and tricks. And Faith Hassan is here supporting us in the chat and making sure your questions are documented. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. No, we've been on Zoom or in virtual worlds for the last couple years. Some of us might use Teams more regularly. So just quickly going over some Zoom information. The bottom of your screen, you should have a toolbar where you have a microphone icon. That's where you can mute and unmute yourself. You could also turn your video on if you're comfortable or leave it off, but there's an icon there for that. If you see the participant icon there, you can click on that and see everyone else who's in the meeting. You can also there click on the 3 dots to rename yourself. So feel free to rename yourself to whatever you're comfortable. And we'd also love if you put your org name next to it so we can keep eye on who's here in the room with us today. The chat is open for the whole webinar. So as you have questions, we welcome you to drop them in the chat as they come up. We have a few points where we'll pause to ask questions, but you don't have to wait for those points. Feel free to drop your questions in as they come up. And then in the reactions tab, you could also raise your hand when we get to those areas. All right. Today's webinar will be recorded. So just some info here, it will be recorded and posted on the Air District's website. Questions about the grant program will also be posted online along with the answers, and we'll talk about the timeline for that in just a bit. As we get into the Q&A components, we're going to have one person speak at a time, and I'm going to kindly ask that we mute ourselves when we're not speaking to minimize any background noise. And, you know, we always do our best to be technology prepared, but technology does happen. So please be kind and flexible and patient if it does. Quickly going over our agenda, we're going to do a little getting to know you poll in just a few minutes here, but Eleanor will give a grant overview. There was a longer webinar with more information on the grant that is posted, the recording and the presentation, but we'll do a quick overview. And after that, we'll have some time to pause for questions there. Then Deborah is going to go into some helpful tools, including giving an overview of Bonfire. So Bonfire is the platform in which you'll submit your grant. So if you've never used Bonfire, definitely stick around for that overview. We'll then talk about timeline and some helpful tips on navigating this timeline from today through the grant submission deadline. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and closing out at the end. This webinar and the deck will also be posted on the Air District's website, and we'll make sure the links come through in the chat. So don't feel stressed to type out any links we share or copy and paste out of the chat. We'll definitely make sure that information gets to you all. Okay, so let's get to know the folks in the room a bit. We have a lot of people joining us. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to do what we call a rapid fire set of polls. So we're going to launch one poll at a time. And we just want to hear a little bit about if you've applied for a grant in the past, and then we'll go through a series of polls, yes or no. So the poll has launched, and just yes or no, have you ever applied for a grant before? And if not, and this is your first grant, welcome. We're really glad you're here. I think some of the tips we share today will be helpful for many of things. Seeing lots of polls coming in. Give it just a couple seconds. We're going to do this super rapid fire and we'll share the results. Okay. So let's share. So we've got a lot of folks who have applied for grants in the past, and some this may be your first grant application. That's really exciting to see. Thank you for being here and participating in this. Let's go to our next poll. Has anyone here applied for an air district grant in the past? And this could be any air district grant. So we have some folks, I see the results coming in already. You all are so fast. Thank you for that. Just give it a couple more seconds here. And for those of you that are just joining us, welcome, welcome. We're just doing a quick poll to get to know the folks in the room. So it looks like quite a few folks have applied for an Air District grant in the past, and some have not. So 20 of you all here have applied for an Air District grant, and 12 have not. So again, glad to have you here in this space with us. Next one is to see, has anyone here applied for the Air District grant in the past for this particular program, for the James Cary Smith Community Grant? We know there's been a couple cycles of this. There's a current cycle ongoing. Great. Give this one a couple more seconds. All right. Okay, so sharing the results. Sounds like 11 of you have had participated in this grant process in the past, and 21 folks are new to applying for the James Cary Smith Community Grant. It's awesome and really great to see. Just a couple more of these. As you're thinking about your grant application and potential projects, which counties or county might your projects take place? And it can take place in one county or multiple. But as you're getting a sense of the projects you might apply for, we'd love to see where they may be happening. The Air District oversees a large jurisdiction, and we're hoping that we have applicants coming from various counties and different projects there. Just a couple more seconds on this one. You all are so fast in responding to the poll. And feel free, if you're having any issues with the poll, to just drop thoughts or your response in the chat as well. All right. So a lot of spread here. We've got some folks coming up with ideas for projects in Alameda, Contra Costa. We've got some North County representation in projects as well, in Marin and Napa, Sonoma, Solano, South Bay, Santa Clara, and San Mateo and San Francisco. So a nice spread across there. All right, two more quick questions. Did you attend the introductory webinar on October 22nd? If you did, great. If you did not, no worries. We're going to give a quick overview of the grant at this webinar, and the recording from that, as well as a slide deck, is available on the Air District's website. So you can go in and listen there. We'll also go into the timing of the grant, and there's still plenty of time. So if you did not have a chance to attend that first webinar, no worries. We just want to get a sense of who's in the room. And it looks like some folks were able to attend and a lot of folks were not. So this is helpful, and make sure that, we can answer as many questions as we have time for today, but we'll talk about how to ask questions after this. And our last poll is, how did you hear about this webinar? It's great for us to track how the outreach is going, the best ways to reach folks. So go ahead and let's see, I don't think it is launching. Sorry. There we go. Now you should be able to submit. How did you hear about this webinar? Maybe you got an email from the Air District or from someone on our team, a fellow org out there looking to do great work. So if you want to just drop your thoughts in there, that would be really helpful. And this is our last poll question. So we'll just give it a few seconds. And for those of you that have just joined us, thank you for hopping on. This is the Tips and Trips webinar for the Air District's James Cary Smith Community Grant. We're just doing a quick poll here in the beginning to get to know you all a bit. And then we're going to jump into the grant overview next. Give it a couple more seconds. I see folks are still filling out this last question. And while Eleanor's giving the overview of the grant, just a reminder that you can ask questions in the chat as they come to mind. After the overview, we'll pause for about 10 minutes or so to take initial questions. We'll go through the rest of the content for today's webinar, and then at the end, with whatever time we have left, which should hopefully be plenty of time, we'll be able to address remaining questions. Okay. All right, so I'm going to end the poll, and can't share the results for this one because it was open-ended, but thank you for responding. And I'm going to hand it off to you, Eleanor, for the grant overview.
Great. Thank you so much, Mona and team. Again, my name is Eleanor Mattern. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the Air District's Community Engagement Office. And it's really great to see everyone today. Thank you so much for joining us. So I will try to balance between sharing some information briefly, but trying not to bore those who have already heard this information. So again, there will be time for questions after this. We will share the recording and the slide deck, and you can also reference the recording and the slide deck from our October webinar with extensive information. So the Air District's James Cary Smith Community Grant Program is offering $1.5 million in grant funding for community-based organizations. The grants are really intended to support local groups to fully participate in decisions that impact the environment and health of communities these groups serve. So the maximum dollar amount for an individual grant is $300,000 for up to 3 years, and there is no minimum amount for grant award. So who can apply? California community-based organizations with 501c3 status can apply for grants, or an organization without tax-exempt status can apply with a fiscal sponsor. And Cycle 1 current James Cary Smith grantees are eligible to apply. Proposed projects must be conducted in the San Francisco Bay Area within our Air District's jurisdiction. As Mona mentioned, it's a large jurisdiction, and we'll review an interactive map later during the presentation. There are preferential geographies for this grant program. So detailed information is in the request for applications, but briefly, we wanted to share that our agency uses several statewide resources to identify preferential geographies. One is Assembly Bill 617, and that is state legislation that requires local air districts, including ours, to increase their focus on addressing local air pollution disparities. Another tool is Cal EnviroScreen 4.0. And again, we'll share more information about that. Preference will be given to proposed projects serving one or more communities that are either awaiting Assembly Bill 617 designation or communities with an overall score of 70 to 100 in Cal EnviroScreen 4.0. We recognize that these aren't the only ways to identify environmental justice communities. Other screening methodologies may be considered. And so additional information about that is included in the request for applications. And one thing we want to note that is different from the 2021 request for applications, that was for cycle 1. For this current cycle in 2024, proposed projects can be located within communities that are designated AB 617 communities. So that includes Bayview Hunters Point, East Oakland, West Oakland, and Richmond, North Richmond, San Pablo. So we do want to note again that that is different from 3 years ago when the last request for applications was released. So on the next slide, we'd like to share information about what kinds of work can be funded. So overall, proposed projects should focus on working collaboratively with community members to uplift local efforts that improve air quality and public health. So applicants can propose projects that include any combination of the approaches listed here. The program categories include community organizing and authentic participation. So community organizing approaches are those which organize communities around air quality and other environmental justice issues. So strategies could include education and outreach, community needs assessments, leadership development, community mobilizing, and coalition building, base building. There are also authentic participation approaches that support the full involvement and leadership of environmental justice communities to influence policy and improve air quality. So some of those strategies may include providing communities with resources and information about air quality and health, planning activities that help communities learn about local air quality issues and really explore the root causes of air pollution and its impact, and also identify agencies that may address their concerns, including but not limited to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. Other strategies may include providing advocacy training or leadership training, or perhaps facilitation training, or perhaps making recommendations to air district staff. And again, want to just really recognize that any combination of approaches can be used. We recognize that each community is different. So with that, I will turn it back to Mona, and we will see if there are any questions that we can answer at this time.
Yes, thank you, Eleanor. So we have about 15 minutes here. If there are initial questions, sorry, I'm going to turn my audio up. This should be better. We're going to take questions in a few ways. So if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand, and we will piggyback between the two, switching between. So who has any questions about what they've heard so far from Eleanor, or maybe something they've read in the grant guidelines? You all a few moments here to think. And if we don't have questions now, that's okay. There's time at the end of the webinar as well. Okay. I see a question in the chat. This is from Terry. Is there a possibility that the grant may be affected by the recent election? That's a
Thank,
question from Terry.
thank you, Terry, for the question. No, the grant will not be affected by the recent election. The funds are already set aside for these grant awards, and the election will not impact them.
Great. Thank you, Eleanor. Another thing that I'd like to mention is, as we're trying to answer questions live today best we can, the Air District will be posting responses to any questions received, including the ones given live today, on the website. And those question responses will kind of be the final weight. So when you see those written responses, please refer to them. But if you ask questions today, you don't need to resubmit them after. We're going to go ahead and include those in the questions submitted to the Air District. All right. Are there any? Okay, another question, also from Terry. Is there a disadvantage or advantage for being a current grantee?
Thank you for the question. There is no disadvantage or advantage for being a current grantee. And let me just speak briefly about the application review process, because I think that's a great segue, Terry. So as stated in the request for applications, there are minimum requirements that each applicant will need to satisfy. And so those are listed in the request for applications document. And so please keep in mind, as Mona and the team will talk about later, that all applications must be submitted in the bonfire portal by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, January 7th at 2025. We cannot accept, unfortunately, any applications submitted at 5:01 or 5:02. So please keep that in mind, and we'll be talking about allowing plenty of time for you and your team to work with the bonfire portal and upload everything. And another thing to keep in mind is that all applications will be reviewed for meeting minimum requirements. And so if an application does not meet all minimum requirements, it will be disqualified from the application review process. And something that we want to emphasize is that after that, applications will go to an application review panel. And please do not assume that the application review panel knows anything about your organization or your project or the community you're working in. So please make sure to spell out any acronyms, provide information and overviews. Assume that the application review panel, again, does not know about your organization, even if you have received one or more grants in the past. That's something really important to keep in mind.
Great. Thank you, Eleanor. Couple more questions coming in. The next one is an Is an eligible project include the purchase of passenger vans to transport people, electric passenger vans to be specific? So would that be eligible?
That's a
And this,
good question. We're really looking for projects that build the capacity of local communities. The Air District does have some incentive programs that help with the purchase of electric vehicles, and so that might be better suited for a different Air District program. This grant is really about building capacity and working with community members to perhaps train the trainer or provide education, provide different information to help build power and capacity.
okay. Thank you, Eleanor. And that was from Ashley. Thank you, Ashley. Lourdes asks, can we apply to keep serving the cities we are currently with by our current JCS grant? Sorry, we are currently working with. So can we apply to keep serving the cities we are currently working with by our current JCS grant? Is that
Thank
acceptable?
you for the question. So yes, if folks are currently conducting James Cary Smith funded projects, folks can apply for Cycle 2 funding. Again, just as I mentioned, individuals should be very specific in the applications about what their project is, what the communities are that are being served, whether those would continue, whether those would change, if so, why. And then applicants should also really emphasize how would additional funding build upon the successes of a current grant? How would they provide something new and really expand the reach and the impact of that? So that's something to keep in mind, Lourdes.
Great. Thank you. A follow-up question from Annie. For current grantees, how are they assessed differently than new grantees?
Thank you for the question. All applications will be again screened to see if they meet minimum requirements. And then an application review panel will review the program narratives and the cover sheets for each applicant. So they won't be assessed differently than the new grantees. Again, they should really emphasize within an application what they're doing currently and how they would build upon a current project. I hope that makes sense.
Great, thank you. And there was a question DM to someone else and then sent to us, so everyone can't see it in the chat. I'll read it out loud. Is there a way to find orgs that are willing to partner? Is there a setup for that, Eleanor?
That is a great question. Let me ask the rest of the grants team, is there a way to find organizations that are interested in partnerships? Partnerships are welcomed and encouraged. And I'm just trying to think whether we have a way in place to do that. Does the grants team have any thoughts that come to mind?
Hi, Anish Rana with the community engagement team working to support the JCS grants program. That's a great question. I think since the application is live, we're really limited in what the JCS team here can do to assist with that. But I would direct folks to our website where we have a list of previous and current JCS grant awardees. And from there, you could probably also there's information about those projects. And if anything resonates or is of interest, you could consider reaching out to those organizations directly.
Thanks, Anish. And I'll just jump in here really quickly. Eleanor, this is a great question. And I think it's something that we take back and try to figure out if we can support for future rounds or future grants here at the Air District, just to facilitate the partnership. I think it's a great idea. One thing we can do right now, if folks are willing, see some people have, but you can list your organization that you represent in the participants portion of Zoom. And maybe that'll help folks identify maybe some overlaps with the work that they do. And I know from experience with non-government organizations, it's usually like very open to collaboration. And perhaps folks could just reach out organically if they see an organization they've been wanting to work with in the past, or if you have admired their work in the past, the possibilities are infinite.
Mm.
So I see some people updating their orgs. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Anish and Joshua. And I'll just add one additional thing, which is that we intentionally made this a pretty long application period. And I think part of that is acknowledging that there are opportunities for partnership and supports. We know that those take time, that everyone's extremely busy, especially in the nonprofit world. So please utilize this longer application period and reach out as needed to help build some of those partnerships. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Excited to hear about all of that. Next question we have about 5 more minutes here, so we'll get through a couple more questions. From Mike, would a project that includes community engagement, organizing, and education that eventually culminates in a community tree planting or sidewalk garden installation be eligible? And more specifically, would materials and supplies costs be eligible expenses?
Hi, thank you so much for the question. Yes, that would be eligible. Again, please keep the community capacity building component in mind. And so through the community engagement, the organizing, the education, in a proposal for a project of that type, we would hope that the organization would really lift up how the individuals in a given community would build their power through such a project. And then as Anish mentioned, on our website, you can find information about current grantees, some of whom are doing work of that nature and really successfully in very exciting ways.
Awesome, thank you. See some folks dropping in the chat that they're open to collaboration, some comments about other things. I won't read those out loud, direct you to the chat for that. From Pew, hi Pew, a question, can we apply to this grant based on the current BAA QMD program, such as Clean Car for All?
Hi, thank you for the question. I may need a little bit of clarification. So we do partner with our colleagues who work on the Clean Cars for All program. That is also through the Air District. And we realize that there is a lot of crossover with the communities that folks are working with. And so that is something that could certainly be in parallel with a capacity building program. For this grant program, we are looking for applications that would really lift up ways to build community capacity. Sharing information about the Clean Cars for All program is encouraged and welcomed. But again, the project narrative should describe a capacity building project that the nonprofit would implement.
Okay. Thank you. Going to our next question, would project materials and supplies costs be eligible expenses? And this is from Rhonda.
Yes, thank you for the question. So project materials and supply costs would be eligible expenses. What we do is we do require that each applicant submit a project budget with their application. That is not something that is scored, but it is something that is required. The format doesn't matter. The technical assistance team today will be talking about some different approaches, and they'll share an example if folks would like to use that. But the format doesn't matter. However, that information is very useful, one, for the application review panel to review, and then two, for any project that is awarded a grant, that can help become the basis for the scope of work and the contract that then would be developed. And so a contract would lay out what kind of components would be eligible expenses, and then the grantee and the Air District would be in close conversation about those throughout the course of the contract.
All right. Thank you. We're going to take our last question for this segment. If you have more questions, you could submit them to the Air District or wait, hang on and drop them in the chat as we go, and we'll have some more time at the end for more questions. So our last question for this segment is from Russell. Community weather stations, would that be something eligible?
That's a good question. I am not sure if that would be something that would be eligible. And I'm wondering if Anish, if you want to weigh in on this one, or if we should get back to Russell.
I think we have, yeah, this is a good question. I think we will have to get back to Russell We do identify certain things that project funds cannot be or are not eligible. Yeah, I think the team will have to take this back.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for all of your questions. Continue to submit them, and then Russell, I'm sure you'll be very interested on when responses will be posted. So we'll look at that when we talk on timeline. I'm going to hand off now to my colleague Deborah O, who's going to go over some of our tips for applying for government grants. She'll talk about the interactive map Eleanor mentioned, and then the bonfire demonstration. So passing it over to you, Deborah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mona. Yeah, so the process for applying for government grants can be different from applying for funding from other sources. I know some of you are familiar with this process and some of you are less familiar. So there are a couple things to keep in mind when applying for government grants, and we have a couple tips that we wanted to share with you. First of all, follow instructions to the T exactly as they're written. Make sure to provide all the information requested and fill out and submit all required forms in the requested format. This includes instructions on file naming and page limits. More on that in a little bit. And as Eleanor mentioned, unfortunately, applications that don't meet the minimum requirements and follow these guidelines will be disqualified from the review process. And we don't want this to happen to you, so please read the instructions very carefully. Secondly, if anything is unclear, ask questions. All questions and answers will be documented and made public on the Air District website, so everyone will have access. The Air District will post responses periodically that you can refer back to, the written responses. All questions are due by 5 p.m. Wednesday, December 4th, and all responses will be available by 5 p.m. Thursday, December 12th. Please review the grant guidelines and start drafts of your applications early so you can get questions in on time. Sometimes the grant guidelines seem to make sense and then questions come up as you're writing and filling out the application. Because questions are due about a month before the grant application is due, we don't want you to run into having any last minute unanswered questions because we won't be able to provide responses after the question submission deadline. So keep that in mind. Remember that government grants have hard deadlines. This means for both questions and grant application deadlines. So the grant is due by Tuesday, January 7th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. For legal reasons, the Air District can't accept any applications even a minute late. We really want to avoid any mishaps and technical difficulties. So we recommend getting your application in at least 24 hours before the deadline. And make sure to proofread, double check, triple check your work. Make sure you followed all instructions. Once you have completed the application, you can have someone else read the guidelines and requirements, review your application again. It's always helpful to have another pair of eyes to proof for any mistakes or instructions you might have overlooked. Now I'll go over some of the specifics of the James Cary Smith grant. Next slide. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen and we can look at this map from the Air District. Okay, great. So if you look at this map, the black borders show the borders of the Air District's jurisdiction. So to be eligible, proposed projects have to take place within these borders. Highlighted in blue, let me zoom in a little bit, are the AB 617 designated community boundaries. And then highlighted in pink are the top 30% based on CalEnviro's score. One way a project can receive preference if it's based in one of these pink CalEnviro screen communities of score from 70 to 100. And if you look at the map, this includes parts of Concord, Pittsburgh, Antioch, Richmond, Vallejo, San Francisco, just to name a couple places. if you have a very specific area in mind, you can also write in a city or address over up here. So for instance, in San Francisco, let's say 9th Street and Howard. San Francisco. If you click there, you'll zoom in to an area. You can click on the area. You can see that the CalEnviro screen percentile is 70. So that area would be eligible to receive priority. You can also put in a city, South San Francisco. And that will zoom to the area once again. And then you can click there, zoom in, and check in the CalEnviro screen score just to double check. And remember, when using this tool, we're talking about the project area, not necessarily where your organization is located, but where the project will be taking place. Let me move on to the cover sheet and grant guidelines. So, and before I move on, is there any questions regarding the CalEnviro screen map? Check. Okay. So let me move on. So at the end of the grant guidelines, there is a cover sheet in the Appendix A, page 17. The cover sheet, like we mentioned, it won't be scored, but it is mandatory to submit with the rest of your application. To make things a little bit easier for you, we extracted those 2 pages and created a fillable PDF that we'll share at the end of this presentation. So just, you can click on the blue boxes, kind of write in your organization name, year established. You can check whether you are a 501c3 status, and then you will also be submitting verification this year of your 501c3 status. You can go through, check whether you were an applicant of the James Cary Smith Community Grant in or after 2019. Provide mission statement, and then if you go to the second page, look at your program category, choose which of the categories your program falls into, checking all that apply. Same thing, filling out your responses to how your proposed project will, providing a brief description of the proposed project. We added a page at the end where you can fill out just a 1-page maximum brief description of the proposed project. And then you can fill out the number of years of funding desired. You can put an amount, and if years 2 and 3 are not applicable, you can write NA or not applicable, so you don't accidentally leave anything blank. And then once you're done with this, can sign the application. You can also just type in your name, which will be accepted as your signature. And you will save this document. Every file you submit, make sure to include the organization or applicant's name, and then name what the file you're submitting is. So you would save as, for instance, interethnica _ cover sheet for this file. Okay. And I will move on to the narrative section. Before I move on, does everyone have access to Word documents or Google Doc? Okay, awesome. Let me share my screen. Great. So this is the project on the following page after the cover page. This shows the project narrative. Here's where the bulk of the application starts. When writing the project narrative, as Eleanor mentioned, assume that the review panel knows nothing about your proposed project. Even if you are a previous grantee, the review panel will not be familiar with your project. So please explain everything you're proposing, spell out any acronyms. And we recommend using either Word doc or Google Doc for your proposal. So once again, all answers submitted must be a minimum of 11-point font on 8.5 by 11 paper, and the maximum is 5 pages for the project narrative. And once you finish writing, this is just a sample, what you wrote, you can rename to save it as a PDF file, save as. I save this one as interethnica_proposal. Go to save as PDF and export. It works similarly for a Google Doc. You will go to File, Download, PDF document, and you can save that as a PDF as well. Another tool that we highly recommend when writing proposals is Grammarly. So Grammarly is a free tool that you can just sign up for on grammarly.com. You can upload a file that you're working on or copy or paste your what you're working on into Grammarly directly. So I just put this in here as a sample. We recommend this because when you're writing a first draft of a proposal, the goal is really to just get all your ideas down without getting distracted thinking about spelling and grammar and wordsmithing. So you can always check, you can always put this in Grammarly and then check what's wrong or any spelling issues you might see, and you can kind of see like how those issues will show up. And at the end of this webinar, we'll provide you with a link to a bunch of free tools that you may find helpful for spelling and grammar. And some of these tools are usable in multiple languages, and some of them have like different features. Next thing that we'll go over, now that we've gone over the cover sheet, the project narrative, the last remaining section is the project budget. Oops. So we created this, once again, this section is required but won't be scored. We understand that this is often the most difficult part about the application. Please don't let this deter you from applying. The budget is simply there to tell a story of your project and provide a rationale for the requested amount to make sure that we're responsibly spending public dollars. We've created a sample project budget template that will provide that you can use and you can modify as you see fit, but you can use any format that you want. This isn't an official template. This is just to help you. Remember to include in the budget the cost of personnel or staff, any materials and supplies, and then most importantly, when submitting the project budget, clearly break up the estimated project budget by year, kind of like how we did here. And then if you go to the second tab, the grant application asks you to submit information regarding additional sources of funding for your proposed project. The second tab includes the sheet that you can fill out for additional sources of funding, total contribution, and contribution status, whether you have already secured the funding or whether the funding has been committed, requested, or not yet requested. There's also additional space to provide information on how the proposed project will be adjusted if the project is only supported by the funds from this grant program. And once you fill out the sample project budget, once again, save as PDF in order to submit the file and upload it on Bonfire. Before I move on, is there any questions about what I've reviewed so far? And then we'll move on to the Bonfire section. Okay. So I see one question. Can we get a list of items that are ineligible for billing?
Hi, thank you for the question. This is Eleanor. I'd like to refer people to page 9 of the request for applications document. There's a section that shares work that cannot be funded. And so those are the things that could not be itemized in a budget. So for example, that includes lobbying, purchasing air filter masks, purchasing air monitors, conducting air monitor projects or air pollution modeling projects, endowment campaigns, development of educational materials that are not tied to community organizing efforts or authentic participation efforts, fundraising activities, or marketing of products or technologies for profit. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, if there's no other questions, I'll move over to the Bonfire portal. Just to get an idea, who here already has a Bonfire account? Not, I see some shaking the head. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so the Bonfire is the Air District's centralized place to electronically submit and receive proposals. Once on the site, you can log in if you already have an account or go to register. And you can register your organization name. Demos. And create an account. Great. And once you create an account, you will get an email confirmation to complete your. So I can suggest a password, let's say, and continue. Yes, I see a question from Manuel.
Yeah, thanks. So I am on bonfire.com, and because we do have an account, is that the same platform? It looks a little different than what you have.
We have a link. Did we share it in the chat to specifically the Air District's Bonfire account?
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
So it should be the same. But there's a direct link to the Air District's
Yeah,
portal.
but it looks like a different company. I think that's
Okay.
it's a non-profit thing, but it's for campaigning and fundraising. Okay, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Great. So once you're there, you can, if this is new, you can create your company, write in all the information, click save and next. And let me log out to just show how it looks like when you already have an account. Okay. So let me log in. And when you log into the site, you'll see open public opportunities. And if you look down here, it says JCS 2024 James Cary Smith Community Grant Program. You can click View Opportunity. Here you can see more project details. It has a calendar that shows when the deadline is, how long the project is open for. You can click over here, questions due date. You can click Ask a Question. You can submit a question, click Send. That's one way to submit a question. If you go over here, this is where you can download the James Cary Smith Grant Guidelines and get a PDF of it. And then if you scroll down all the way to Works in Progress, you can click Continue Submission. And here is where you would be uploading your PDF files. So you can submit multiple PDFs. There's no limit to the number of files you can upload. So you can put all the different PDFs together in one PDF, or if that's too complicated, you can submit 4 different PDFs. Once again, that would be the cover sheet, your narrative, budget, and then proof of your 501c3 status. So please remember to submit all 4 components in order for your proposal to move on to scoring. And then once you upload, you can click upload, pick a PDF, upload. And then you can always come back to this site once you're ready because it will save. And then once you're ready, you can click, I understand that. I can't change any of the submissions, and then submit and finalize my submission once you are done with that. So now that I've walked through the entire application process, I'll just stop for a moment, see if there's any questions about the application process before I hand it over to Mona to go over important dates and timeline.
Okay, I do see some questions in the chat. I think they're more broad, so we could hold them until we get to our next question segment, but keep them coming in the chat. If we haven't answered your question yet, it's coming in our next segment. I wanted to provide an overview of the important dates and then just some guidance and examples of what this might look like as we plug it into our calendars between now and January 7th, the due date for this grant application. So on December 4th, all questions about grant applications are due. So if you have any questions you'd like the Air District to answer, please submit them before 5 p.m. on December 4th. The Air District is responding to questions as fast as they can as they come in, and they're going to be posting various iterations of a response document, but the final responses to grant application questions will be posted on December 12th, at 5 p.m. So if you're waiting for a question to be responded to, the Air District will post something on December 12th at 5. All of the applications are due January 7th at 5 p.m. As Deborah mentioned, these are hard deadlines, so 501 can't be accepted. We encourage you to submit early, but that is the deadline. In the winter of 2025, the grants will be awarded, and hopefully the grant agreements will be finalized by the spring. Summer of 2025 through summer of 2028, grantees will be performing their work. So these are the important dates. This is what's in the grant guidelines. And what I'm going to show next is just some offering of advice on how we might approach this. I want to be clear, Interethica is not submitting a grant on this. We are not a nonprofit organization. We do submit proposals and similar types of applications often. And so we're just offering this as guidance for you all, especially as we enter the holiday season. So as a suggested timeline, After today's webinar, we would suggest, if you haven't already, to review the grant guidelines in detail. Take a close read of them, create your bonfire account, and perhaps start drafting your response, maybe an outline, piecing together your ideas so that you can submit your questions before December 4th. You might have questions as you read through the grant guidelines, and you might have more questions when you start writing and putting together your budget. So as much as you can start that work before the question submission deadline, that would be ideal. Questions will be responded to again on December 12th. And then after that, take some time to read through the questions and the responses, even if you didn't submit a question, because sometimes there's new information coming out of the responses to other folks' questions that may impact how you'd like to approach your grant application. And so then you have time in December to finalize your response and budget. And please proof your grant guidelines, not just for grammar and writing, but as you're going through the writing process before you submit, just double check that the version you're landing with aligns with what the grant guidelines are asking for. I think many of us can relate to multiple hands being in a document or shifting direction, and we just don't want you to miss any of the requirements. So after you're done editing, take a look at your proposal against the grant guidelines and that checklist. And then by January 7th at 5 p.m., the grant applications are due. Another tip that I'd like to call out, and I'll talk through on the next few slides, is to check your staff and teams out of office and holiday schedules, as well as your own out of office and holiday schedules, to make a plan for any internal discussions you need, review periods, or anything like that around the holidays. It's a long grant application period, but we also know that it's been an election season where a lot of organizations might be out organizing to get the votes out, and then you may be having holiday events at your organizations as well. So keeping those kinds of things in mind as you build out your schedule. And so what might that look like? If I was looking at this, this is just an example of a calendar. We had an election. We're into the next week. Monday is a holiday. So next week, I would be reviewing the grant guidelines in detail, maybe having a project brainstorm with some folks at our organization, getting everyone's ideas, and creating the bonfire account. So doing that next week would probably be a great way to get ahead. And then to start drafting that response outline and budget in the following week before Thanksgiving and Native American Heritage Day. We know a lot of folks kind of head out of office on that Wednesday, and leading into Thanksgiving and Native American Heritage Day. Before we know it, after that weekend, it's December and your questions are due by the 4th. So I've got some things on this calendar like, hey, maybe my boss is out of office on that Monday, so I might need to think about that ahead of time. My finance team is out on the 9th, so I can't get that double check on the budget I want to submit. So these are the kinds of things going into your grant application writing process that you might want to consider. So as long as you get those questions in by the 4th at 5 p.m., the responses are posted on the 12th. I have an out of office day that day as an example here. And then through the 16th through the 20th, you've got time to update your proposal, update the budget based on the question responses if that affects you all, and send it out for final review. Because right after that, we're entering Christmas week. A lot of folks are off, and then the New Year holiday as well. So thinking about all of this time and consideration, hopefully this helps you think through when you need to approach different pieces. A lot of folks won't be back in office until right after the January 1st holiday, which just gives you a couple of working days. You've got Friday and Monday before those grant applications are due on January 7th. So just a bit of advice: when you're looking at the timeline, it might feel long, but take a look at your calendars, note what events your organizations are hosting and when you need different eyes on it so you meet these deadlines and get your application in on time. I hope that was a little bit helpful in illustrating that, at least. And the last thing, again, pro tip: before submitting your proposal, run a final proof against those grant guidelines and the Appendix A application checklist. That's on page 16 of the grant guidelines. In that checklist, you'll want to make sure you have your cover sheet together and filled out completely, proof of your 501c3 status, or your applicant or your fiscal sponsor's 501c3 status. So make sure that proof is ready. Double
Yeah.
check.
Okay. I think, oh,
Sorry, hi. I can't see who came off mute. If you have a question,
apologies. That was a mistake on unmuting.
no worries. It's okay. Technology happens. So I was saying to make sure you have the proof of your 501c3 or your applicants or your fiscal sponsor. Double check that your project narrative meets the font requirements, that it's no longer than 5 pages and it has the sections needed, and then that your project budget is being submitted. All right. There is application assistance available. So grant guidelines are available in multiple languages: English, Chinese, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Tagalog on the Air District's website. Like I said earlier, the Air District will post a frequently asked questions or FAQ document with responses to the questions, and that will be updated as questions are received, with the final version posted on December 12th at 5 p.m. If you need any assistance in English, feel free to write to the Air District directly. That email address is communitygrants@baaqmd.gov. And then if you need additional assistance in other languages, you can reach out to us at Interethnica. If you shoot an email to info@interethnica.com, and we'll put this information in the chat as well at the end, we'll be able to receive any emails or questions in the language of your choosing and have our team reach out to you to help navigate that. All right. And so we're back at a point now where we can take additional questions. I know there were some questions asked earlier in the chat, so I want to start by going back to those. As a reminder, we'll take questions from the chat, we'll take hands raised, so feel free to ask the question in a way that works for you. I'm going to go ahead and drop the screen share for now to take on some of those questions. So I believe the last question in the chat that has not been addressed yet is, would a California registered tribal community, but with no federal land, qualify as priority when they do not have any land, but instead targeting the members of the tribe? And this question is from David.
Hi, David. Thank you for the question. We encourage you to submit an application and to note that in the program narrative when you're discussing the communities. And then the application review panel will review that and will discuss whether a 5-point bonus would be awarded. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Eleanor. The next question we had was, I believe, from Leslie. On the application cover sheet, how do you want applicants to state how long they've been in business? For example, we've been fiscally sponsored since 2020, 2021, but also now have our own EIN, just waiting to receive the determination letter from the IRS.
Thank you for the question. So on that page, the cover sheet, under that year established field, you can list the year that your organization began. And we know that looks different for different organizations. So it's not a problem if the organization did have 501c3 status at that time or did not. We're just generally looking to see when did your group or organization start working with the community.
Great. Thank you. The next question we had come in the chat was about the list of items that are ineligible for billing. So it sounds like that is in the grant guidelines. Eleanor mentioned the list earlier. Another question came in from Monique. Can projects be in Napa and Solano County and get preference?
Hi, yeah, thanks for your question, Monique. I did put an answer in the chat. There's a link there. So the eligible projects must be within the Air District's jurisdiction, geographic jurisdiction, which does include Napa County and the southern portion of Solano County. I put a link in the chat there to an interactive map that shows the Air District's jurisdiction, as well as the communities in the Bay Area that have a Cal Enviro Screen 4.0 score of 70 to 100. And it also, that map also outlines the current 4 communities that have AB 617 that have been designated as AB 617 CERT communities. And then as far as preference, that extra preference score, those are available to projects that will be serving the community, the communities in the Bay Area that are awaiting AB 617 designation, and those include the Pittsburgh Bay Point area, San Jose, San Leandro, the Tri-Valley, including the cities of Dublin, Livermore, Pleasanton, and San Ramon, and Vallejo. And then in addition to those communities, projects again with a Cal Enviro Screen 4.0 score of 70 to 100. We want to note, though, that CalEnviro Screen 4.0 is a tool that's used to screen for relative pollution burden, but is not the only consideration for preference. And I highlighted there in my response in the chat that if another jurisdiction located within the air district's boundaries has a different screening methodology that identifies other environmental justice communities, the applicant should include that in their application for consideration. So I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to put a follow-up question in the chat or raise your hand. All right.
Great. Thank you so much, Anish. Couple more questions. And I'm sorry, this one was out of order. I was reading through the chat backwards. Apologies. Pew asked, how many grants will be awarded from this cycle? And I know, Eleanor, you had responded in the chat, but maybe you want to respond verbally as well.
Certainly. Yeah, thank you for the question. This was asked in our previous webinar as well, so want to acknowledge that. So we do anticipate that this will be a very competitive grant cycle. We don't know with certainty the exact number of slots. That will depend on what dollar amounts different applicants request and whether they request 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years of funding. But we anticipate awarding perhaps between 6 to 11 grants, depending on the applications received.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. Sorry, I turned my video off. I just had to sneeze a bit there. Let's continue down the questions we're receiving. There was a question in the chat that was also answered in the chat, and there's a link, but this is from David. Where is the Cycle 1 grant awardees and or projects that were funded located on the Air District's website? Navigational website help, please. So Eleanor, you had posted the link in the chat there. I don't know if there's any additional guidance you'd like to provide to David or others on how to navigate.
Thank you for the question. I'll just provide a little bit of additional information. So if you go, I posted the link in the chat, but if you go to the James Cary Smith landing page, as it were, it's www.baaqmd.gov/community grants. If you scroll all the way down, it's a little tricky to see. But under the purple box where you can sign up to receive updates, it says to view recipients of current and previous grant cycles, please visit the Community Grant Awards page. So just wanted to let folks know how to navigate to that. And then I will just draw your attention to a couple of other things. One is that we just actually were able to post some grantee vignettes, some environmental justice success stories. And so I know we have some of those folks on the line today. I will drop the link in the chat. But if you, again, go to the JCS webpage and then click on environmental justice success stories, you can read a little bit more about some of the variety of the projects that are currently taking place in different communities. So it's really exciting. Thanks for the question.
All right. We have more time for additional questions. So if there are additional questions, go ahead and raise your hand or drop them into the chat. A lot of really great questions today. Love seeing them all. And thank you again for all of you for being here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We have an evaluation form that we'd love for you all to fill out. It helps us in the Air District know what was helpful about today's webinar and additional questions or feedback you might have. So Faith will drop that in the chat, along with a ton of other links for helpful tools that Deborah has talked about today, as well as some additional tools as well. Just a reminder that the sample project budget template is a tool if you'd like to use it, but it's not required that you use that template. You can use what works for you, as long as you're meeting all of that's required to be in your budget within the grant guidelines. The Bonfire link is there as well, and Bonfire does have a unique web page for each of the organizations there. So Manuel, thank you for raising that earlier. You do want to make sure you go to this link, the baaqmd.bonfire.com, and the evaluation form is linked there as well. So With that, I want to say a big thank you for taking the time out of your day today to be here and for your interest in this grant and all the work your various organizations do in the communities here in the Bay Area. Be sure to submit all of your questions no later than Wednesday, December 4th, and keep an eye out on the Air District's website for this recording and deck. You can go to the Air District's website if you missed the informational webinar to see that recording. It's a little more detailed on the grant guidelines and the grant itself, so feel free to go there. We have time for additional questions if you have them, but if you don't, that will conclude our webinar today. So thank you all for those that joined, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. I'm going to transition to a question in the chat, and feel free to hang on or sign off. Terry's asking if there is a link to the cover page PDF. Is there a link to the cover page PDF?
I can share that now.
Okay, sounds like Deborah will drop that in the chat. Seeing all the thank yous. Thank you all for being here. If there's no other questions, we can wrap up for today. Thank you so much.
Great job, everyone. Take care.